The barn door swung open with a groan that echoed through the Montana dawn, and Caleb Thorne's stopped cold. Someone was inside. Not a horse, not a coyote looking for shelter. A man slumped against the far wall beneath the hayloft ladder, his head bowed forward, his breath coming shallow and uneven. His clothes were filthy, torn at the shoulder, stained dark with something Caleb didn't want to name yet. One hand rested limp in his lap. The other clutched a tin canteen like it was the last thing keeping him tethered to the world. Caleb's grip tightened on the pitchfork he'd been carrying. His pulse kicked up. He didn't move closer, not yet. "Hey," he called out, voice flat and cautious. "You alive?" The man didn't answer, didn't flinch, just sat there, chest rising and falling in slow, labored drags. Caleb glanced back toward the house. His wife, Mary, was still inside with their daughter. The ranch sat 2 miles from the nearest neighbor, 5 from town. If this stranger was dangerous, there'd be no help coming fast. But the man didn't look dangerous. He looked half dead. Caleb stepped forward, boots crunching on the straw-covered floor. The morning light slanted through gaps in the barn's planks, cutting the space into stripes of gold and shadow. Dust hung in the air like suspended breath. "I said, you alive." This time the man stirred. His head lifted slow, like it weighed more than he could manage. His face came into the light. Caleb's stomach turned. The man was old, maybe 60, maybe older. His beard was streaked with gray and caked with dried blood. A long gash ran down his temple, crusted black at the edges. His eyes were sunken, rimmed red, and when they focused on Caleb, there was no fear in them, just exhaustion, the kind that went deeper than bone. "Water," the man rasped, his voice cracked on the single word. Caleb hesitated. Every instinct told him to ask questions first. "Who are you? What happened? Why are you in my barn?" But the man's lips were cracked and peeling, his skin gray as ash. He looked like he'd crawled through hell and hadn't bothered to look back. Caleb lowered the pitchfork and crossed to the water barrel near the stalls. He filled a tin cup and brought it over, crouching a few feet away. He held it out. The man reached for it with trembling fingers. He drank in desperate gulps, water spilling down his chin, soaking into his collar. When the cup was empty, he slumped back against the wall and closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Caleb didn't move. "Who are you?" The man's throat worked. He didn't open his eyes. "Nobody. Nobody doesn't end up bleeding in my barn." A faint, bitter smile tugged at the corner of the man's mouth. "Maybe I do." Caleb stood, stepping back to put distance between them. He studied the stranger, the torn clothes, the bruises on his knuckles, the way his left boot was scuffed and split at the sole. This wasn't some drifter who'd gotten unlucky on the road. This was someone who'd been run down, hunted. "You in trouble?" Caleb asked. The man's eyes opened. They fixed on Caleb with a clarity that hadn't been there before. "Yeah." "What kind?" "The kind that don't follow a man this far unless they mean to finish it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Who's after you?" The man didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, at the dirt beneath his nails, the dried blood in the creases of his palms. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost resigned. "Men who think I owe them something." "Do you?" The man's gaze lifted. For a moment, something flickered there, shame, maybe, or regret. "Once I would have said no, now I don't know." Caleb's chest felt tight. He didn't like this. Didn't like the way the man spoke in riddles, didn't like the weight in his words. But there was something else too, something familiar in the slump of the man's shoulders, the hollow look in his eyes. Caleb had seen that look before, in himself, years ago. "What's your name?" he asked. The man hesitated. Then slowly he said, "Silas Carver." The world tilted. Caleb went still, his breath caught in his throat. The name hung in the air between them like smoke, thick and choking. "Silas Carver. It couldn't be, it shouldn't be." But the man's face, now that Caleb looked closer, past the blood and the years, it was there. The sharp line of his jaw, the scar just above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes held steady even when everything else about him was falling apart. Caleb's voice came out strangled. "Say that again." The man frowned, confused. "Selah's carver." Caleb took a step back, then another. His heart hammered against his ribs, his hands shook. Selah's noticed, his brow furrowed. "You know me." Caleb didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing, tearing back through time, 12 years, maybe 13, a homestead in Wyoming, a family name carved on a fence post, a man who'd ridden out one morning and never come back. A man who'd been a friend. A man who'd been there when Caleb's brother died. Selah's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, wincing at the movement. "Do I know you?" Caleb's throat was dry. He forced the words out. "You used to." Selah stared at him. Then slowly recognition crept into his expression. His mouth opened, closed. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Caleb's Thorn." Caleb nodded once. Selah's face went pale. He looked away, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. "Jesus," he breathed, "of all the barns." Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The silence stretched thin and taut, like a rope pulled too tight. Outside, a rooster crowed. The sun climbed higher. The world kept moving. But inside the barn, time had stopped. Finally, Caleb found his voice. It came out rough, edged with something he couldn't name. "You were there." Selah's closed his eyes. "Yeah." "You were there when he died." "Yeah." "And you left." Selah's didn't answer, but the look on his face said everything. Caleb's hands curled into fists. 12 years. 12 years since his brother Jonah had been dragged off a horse by bandits on the road to Cheyenne. 12 years since Selah's had ridden back to camp alone, his shirt soaked in blood that wasn't his, and told Caleb that Jonah was gone, that it had happened too fast, that there was nothing anyone could have done. Caleb had believed him then. But later, days later, when the grief had settled into something colder, he'd heard the whispers, that Selah's had been gambling with those bandits the night before, that money had changed hands, that maybe, just maybe, Selah's had known what was coming and hadn't warned anyone. Caleb had never gotten the truth. Selah's had vanished before he could ask. And now here he was, bleeding in Caleb's barn, half dead, hunted. Caleb's voice came out low and hard. "Why are you here?" Selah's opened his eyes. They were wet. "I didn't know it was your place, I swear." "But you're here." "Yeah. And someone's after you." Selah's nodded. Caleb's jaw tightened. He should walk away, should leave this man to whatever fate was chasing him, should tell Mary to lock the doors and keep their daughter inside until Selah's was gone. But he didn't move. Because even now, even after everything, he needed to know. "Did you set him up?" Caleb's voice cracked on the question. "Did you sell my brother out?" Selah's face crumpled. He looked away, his shoulders shaking. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "No, but I should have stopped it, and I didn't." Caleb stood frozen, staring at the man slumped against the barn wall. The words hung between them like a noose. "I should have stopped it, and I didn't." "What does that mean?" Caleb's voice was sharp, cutting through the stillness. Selah's didn't look up. He pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead, his breath shuddering. "It means I knew something was wrong, I knew those men were trouble, and I let Jonah ride out anyway." "Why?" "Because I was a coward," Selah's voice broke. "Because I owed them money, because I thought if I kept my mouth shut, they'd leave me alone. I didn't think they'd—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I didn't think they'd kill him." Caleb's chest felt like it was caving in. He'd spent 12 years imagining this moment, rehearsing what he'd say if he ever saw Selah's again, but now that it was here, all he felt was hollow. "You let him die." "Yes." The admission came flat and final. No excuses, no justifications, just the truth, raw and ugly. Caleb turned away. He gripped the edge of a stall door, his knuckles white. His mind churned. Jonah's face flickered through his memory, laughing over a campfire, teaching Caleb how to track deer, lying still in the dirt with his eyes wide open. I should kill you, Caleb said quietly. I know. I should drag you outside and let whoever's after you finish the job. I know. Caleb's hand tightened on the wood until it creaked. Why'd you come back? I didn't, Silas said. I've been running for years. This is just where I ended up. Running from who? Silas hesitated. Then slowly he said, the same men, the ones who killed your brother. Caleb turned. They're still alive. Two of them, Silas's voice was bitter. The leader's name is Cutter. He runs a crew out of the Dakotas now, does dirty work for land speculators, burns out homesteaders who won't sell, scares off squatters. I crossed him 3 weeks ago, took something he wanted. He's been on my tail ever since. What do you take? Silas reached into his coat with his good hand and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out. Caleb crossed the barn and took it. The paper was stained and worn, the edges frayed. He unfolded it carefully. It was a deed, a land deed signed and notarized. The name at the top made his blood run cold. Jonah Thorne. Caleb's hands shook. Where did you get this? Cutter had it, Silas said, kept it as a trophy. I found it in his saddlebag when I was working for him. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I didn't know what it was at first, but when I saw the name, I had to take it. I thought maybe if I could bring it back to you, it'd mean something, that it'd make up for, his voice cracked. But it doesn't, does it? Caleb stared at the deed. His brother's signature was there at the bottom, neat and careful. Jonah had filed this claim 2 months before he died, 160 acres in Wyoming. He'd been planning to build a house, start a family. He never got the chance. Caleb's throat tightened. This doesn't fix anything. I know. It doesn't bring him back. I know. Caleb folded the deed and shoved it into his pocket. His voice came out rough. Why didn't you run, father? Why stop here? Because I'm done running. Silas leaned his head back against the wall. I'm 63 years old. I've got a hole in my side, a price on my head, and nothing left to lose. I figured if I'm gonna die, I'd rather do it trying to make one thing right. By bringing me a piece of paper. By telling you the truth. Silas's gaze held steady. I let your brother die because I was selfish and scared, and I've lived with that every day since. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just sorry. Caleb's jaw worked. He wanted to hate this man, wanted to feel the clean, sharp edge of rage, but all he felt was tired. The barn door creaked open. Caleb spun, his hand going to the knife on his belt. Mary stood in the doorway, her face tight with worry. Caleb, I heard voices. It's fine, Caleb said quickly. Go back inside. But Mary's eyes had already found Silas. She stepped into the barn, her gaze sweeping over the blood, the torn clothes, the exhaustion carved into the man's face. Who is he? Caleb hesitated. An old friend. He doesn't look like a friend. He's not anymore. Mary crossed her arms. Then why's he in our barn? Because he's in trouble. What kind? The kind that might show up here looking for him. Mary's expression hardened. She looked at Caleb, then at Silas, then back at Caleb. You planning to help him? I don't know. Then you'd better figure it out fast. She nodded toward the barn door. Because there's dust on the road, 3 riders coming this way. Caleb's stomach dropped. He moved to the door and looked out. Sure enough, a thin plume of dust rose from the trail leading to the ranch. The riders were still a mile off, but they were moving fast. He turned back to Silas. They're yours. Silas's face had gone pale. Yeah. How many? 3 usually, Cutter and 2 others. Caleb swore under his breath. He looked at Mary. Get Sarah and lock the house. Don't open the door unless I tell you to. Mary didn't argue. She turned and ran. Caleb crossed to Silas and crouched down. Can you ride? Not far. Can you shoot? Silas met his eyes. If I have to. Caleb stood and moved to the back of the barn. He pulled an old rifle from the storage loft and checked the chamber. It was loaded. He tossed it to Sealers, who caught it with a wince. "Stay here," Caleb said. "Don't move unless they come inside." Sealers nodded. His hands tightened on the rifle. "Caleb." "Don't." Caleb's voice was hard. "We're not square, not even close, but I'm not letting them kill you in my barn." Sealers's throat worked. "Why?" Caleb didn't answer. He wasn't sure he knew. He stepped outside and closed the barn door behind him. The sun was higher now, burning hot and bright. The dust cloud grew closer. Caleb could see the riders now, 3 dark shapes against the pale sky. He stood in the yard, his hand resting on his pistol, and waited. The riders came slow. Not the kind of slow that meant caution, the kind that meant confidence, the kind that said they'd done this before and knew how it ended. Caleb stood in the dirt yard between the barn and the house, his hand loose at his side, his eyes fixed on the 3 men approaching. The sun beat down on his shoulders. Sweat soaked through his shirt. He didn't move. The lead rider pulled up 20 feet away. The other 2 fanned out to either side, their hands resting on their saddle horns, casual, relaxed, like they were paying a social call. The leader was tall and lean, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. When he tipped it back, Caleb saw a face carved from cruelty, sharp cheekbones, thin lips, eyes like river stones. A scar ran from his left ear to his jaw, pale and puckered. "Cotto." "Afternoon," the man said. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "Nice place you got here." Caleb didn't respond. Cutter's smile widened. "Not much for conversation, huh? That's all right, I'll do the talking." He leaned forward in his saddle. "We're looking for a man. Old fellow, gray beard, might be bleeding. You seen him?" "No." "No," Cutter's eyebrows lifted. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." One of the other riders, a younger man with a patchy beard and nervous eyes, shifted in his saddle. "Boss, there's fresh blood on the barn door." "Cutter's gone." Z flicked to the barn, then back to Caleb. His smile didn't falter. "Well now, that's interesting." Caleb's hand moved closer to his pistol. "Could be from a horse, or a cow, or 100 other things." "Could be," Cutter agreed, "but I don't think it is." He dismounted, his boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud. "See, the man we're looking for, Sealers Carver, maybe you know him. He stole something from me, something valuable, and I've tracked him all the way from the Dakotas to this godforsaken stretch of nothing." He took a step forward. "So you'll understand if I don't take your word for it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You're not going in my barn." "Wasn't asking permission." The third rider, a big man with a scarred face and a rifle across his lap, nudged his horse forward. "Want me to check it, Cutter?" "Not yet, Boone." Cutter held up a hand. His eyes never left Caleb. "Let's give our friend here a chance to do the right thing." He tilted his head. "You hiding him?" "No." "You're lying." "I'm not." Cutter's smile faded. "Then you won't mind if we take a look around." "I do mind." "That's unfortunate." Cutter took another step. "Because we're going to look anyway." Caleb drew his pistol. The movement was smooth and fast, the barrel coming up to level with Cutter's chest. The yard went still. The younger rider's hand twitched toward his gun, but Cutter raised a hand again, stopping him. "Easy," Cutter said softly. His eyes flicked to the pistol, then back to Caleb's face. "You really want to do this?" "Try me." Cutter chuckled. "You got nerve, I'll give you that, but nerve don't mean much when you're outnumbered 3-1. Then you'd better make your first shot count." The big man, Boone, shifted his rifle. "Say the word, Cutter." Cutter didn't move. He studied Caleb for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he said, "You know what's funny? I don't think you care about Sealers. Hell, I don't think you even like him. But you're standing here with a gun on me anyway. Why's that?" Caleb didn't answer. "I'll tell you why," Cutter continued. "Because you're one of those men who thinks honor matters, who thinks standing up for a losing cause makes you noble." His lip curled. "It doesn't, it just makes you dead." "Maybe." "There's no maybe about it." Cutter's voice hardened. "You pull that trigger, and my boys will cut you down before your body hits the dirt. Then we'll burn your barn, search your house, and take what we came for, your wife and kid, they in the house." Caleb's blood went cold. His hand tightened on the pistol. Cutter saw it and smiled. "Thought so, so here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna lower that gun. We're gonna walk into your barn, and if Sealers is in there, we'll take him and be on our way. No fuss, no harm to you or yours." He paused. "But if you keep pointing that gun at me, things get messy. Understand?" Caleb's mind raced. Mary and Sarah were locked in the house, but the walls were thin. If shooting started, they'd be in danger. And even if he got Cutter, Boone and the younger rider would gun him down. But if he let them take Sealers, the man would die. Slowly, probably, painfully. Did he owe Sealers that? Did he owe him anything? Before he could decide, the barn door creaked open. Everyone turned. Sealers stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on the frame, the rifle in his hands. His face was pale, his shirt dark with blood, but his eyes were clear. "Leave him alone," Sealers rasped. Cutter's smile returned. "There you are." Sealers stepped forward, wincing. "This is between us, Cutter, not him." "Oh, I agree." Cutter gestured to Boone and the younger rider. "Take him." The two men dismounted and started forward. Sealers raised the rifle, but his hands shook. Caleb saw it, saw the weakness, the way Sealers's legs barely held him upright. He wouldn't last 10 seconds. Caleb moved without thinking. He stepped between Sealers and the approaching men, his pistol still raised. "No." Cutter sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Good." Boone stopped a few feet away, his rifle aimed at Caleb's chest. "Move." "No." "Move, or I'll drop you where you stand." "Then drop me." The younger rider looked at Cutter, uncertain. Cutter's jaw tightened. His hand moved to his own pistol. And then, from the road, a voice called out. "That's far enough." Everyone froze. Caleb glanced over his shoulder. 4 men on horseback sat at the edge of the property, rifles across their saddles. He recognized the one in front, Carl Winters, a rancher from the next valley over. The others were neighbors, men Caleb had worked cattle with, shared meals with. Carl's voice was steady. "You boys got business here." Cutter's smile vanished. "Private business." "Doesn't look private to me." Carl nudged his horse forward. "Looks like you're threatening a man on his own land, and that don't sit right." Boone's rifle swung toward Carl. "Stay out of this, old man." Carl's rifle came up smoother. "D fast, lower your weapon." The standoff stretched thin. Cutter's eyes darted between Caleb, Sealers, and the 4 men on the road. His jaw worked. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "It is for today," Carl replied. Cutter mounted his horse. Boone and the younger rider followed. They turned and rode off, their figures shrinking into the distance. Caleb lowered his pistol. His hands were shaking. Carl dismounted and walked over. "You all right?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah, thanks." Carl glanced at Sealers. "Who's he?" "Someone I used to know." Carl studied Sealers for a moment, then looked back at Caleb. "You need help?" "No, I got it from here." Carl nodded. He and the others mounted up and rode off, leaving Caleb and Sealers alone in the yard. Sealers slumped against the barn door, the rifle clattering to the ground. "You didn't have to do that." Caleb didn't answer. He wasn't sure why he had. Caleb helped Sealers back into the barn and eased him down onto a pile of hay. The older man groaned, his hand pressing against the wound in his side. Blood seeped through his fingers. "Let me see," Caleb said. Sealers hesitated, then moved his hand. Caleb peeled back the torn fabric of his shirt. The wound was deep, a gash from a knife or something jagged. It needed stitches, maybe more. "You got a doctor in town?" Sealers asked. 5 miles. I won't make it that far." Caleb straightened. "I'll get what I need from the house." He crossed the yard and knocked on the door. Mary opened it a crack, her face tight with fear. Sarah peered out from behind her mother's skirt, her wide eyes fixed on Caleb. "It's over," Caleb said, "for now." Mary's shoulders sagged. "Are you hurt?" "No, but he is. I need bandages, whiskey, and a needle." Mary disappeared inside. A moment later, she returned with a bundle of cloth, a bottle, and a sewing kit. She handed them to Caleb, her expression hard. "I don't like this," she said. "I know. He's going to bring them back." "Maybe." "Caleb." "I know," he met her eyes, "but I can't turn him out, not like this." Mary's jaw tightened. She glanced past him at the barn, then back. "Why?" Caleb didn't answer. He took the supplies and returned to the barn. Silas was leaning back against the wall, his eyes half closed. Caleb crouched beside him and uncorked the whiskey. "This is gonna hurt." "Everything hurts." Caleb poured the whiskey over the wound. Silas hissed, his body going rigid. Caleb worked quickly, cleaning the blood away, threading the needle, pulling the skin together stitch by stitch. Silas didn't make a sound, but his knuckles went white where he gripped the hay. When it was done, Caleb wrapped the wound with bandages and sat back. "That'll hold for now." "Thanks," Silas said quietly. Caleb stood and moved to the barn door. He stared out at the empty road, the dust settling in the heat. His mind churned. "Why'd you really come back?" he asked. Silas was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he said, "Because I couldn't live with it anymore." "With what?" "The weight," Silas's voice cracked, "of knowing I let a good man die because I was too scared to do the right thing." He looked down at his hands. "Your brother, Jonah, he trusted me, and I failed him, I failed you." His throat worked. "I thought if I could at least bring you the deed, if I could tell you the truth, maybe I could, I don't know, die a little lighter." Caleb's chest tightened. He turned to face Silas. "You think one piece of paper makes up for 12 years?" "No." "You think an apology fixes it?" "No." "Then what do you want from me?" Silas met his eyes. "Nothing. I don't want anything. I needed you to know I was sorry, that I've carried it every day, that I've paid for it in ways you can't see." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Caleb. I'm just asking you to know." Caleb stared at him. The anger that had burned in his chest for 12 years flickered, uncertain. He wanted to hold on to it, to let it fuel him, but it was slipping through his fingers like sand. "Jonah would have helped you," Caleb said finally. "Even after everything, he would have stood where I stood today." Silas's eyes filled. "I know. That's the difference between him and me." "No," Silas shook his head. "You did the same thing. You stood. You could have walked away, but you didn't." Caleb looked away. "I don't know why I did." "I do," Silas's voice was steady, "because you're more like him than you think." The words hung in the air. Caleb didn't respond. He couldn't. They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher. The heat pressed down, thick and heavy. Outside, a hawk circled overhead, its shadow sweeping across the dirt. Finally, Silas spoke again. "What happens now?" "I don't know," Caleb admitted. "They'll come back, maybe not today, but soon. Then I'll leave." "You can't ride." "I'll manage." "You won't make it a mile." Silas's jaw tightened. "I won't let them hurt your family." "They won." "T." "You don't know that." "No," Caleb said, "but I know I'm not letting you walk out of here to die on the road." He looked at Silas. "You're staying, at least until you can ride." Silas stared at him. "Why?" Caleb hesitated. Then quietly he said, "Because Jonah would have wanted me to." Silas's face crumpled. He turned away, his shoulders shaking. Caleb stood and walked to the barn door, giving him space. "So here's the question. If you were Caleb, would you have opened that door? Would you have let the past back in, knowing the danger it carried? Take a breath. Think about that. And if you're still with me, let me know what you would have done." 3 days passed. Silas stayed in the barn. Caleb brought him food, changed his bandages, kept watch from the house. Mary didn't speak to him much, but she didn't argue either. She understood, even if she didn't like it. On the 4th day, Carl Winters rode up with two other ranchers. They carried rifles and grim expressions. "Word's out," Carl said. "Cutter's gathering men, hired guns from Billings. He's planning to come back." Caleb's stomach sank. When? Day or two, maybe. Mary appeared in the doorway, Sarah clutching her hand. "Caleb." "I know," he looked at Carl. "How many men does he have?" "7, maybe 8. "Then we're outnumbered." "Not if the rest of us stand with you." Carl glanced at the other ranchers. "We talked it over. Cutter's been a problem for everyone in these parts. Burns homesteads, threatens families. If we let him run roughshod over you, he'll do it to the rest of us too." One of the other men, a grizzled rancher named Tom, nodded. "We're with you, Caleb, whatever happens." Caleb's throat tightened. "You don't have to do this." "We know," Tom said, "but some things are worth standing for." That evening, Caleb went to the barn. Sealers was sitting up, his color better, his breathing steadier. He looked up when Caleb entered. "They're coming back, aren't they?" Sealers said. "Yeah." Sealers nodded slowly. "Then I need to leave tonight." "You're not strong enough." "Doesn't matter. If I stay, they'll burn this place down. Your family." "We'll be fine." Caleb sat down on a crate. "Carl and the others are coming tomorrow. We're making a stand." Sealers stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do." "It's not your fight." "It is now." Caleb met his eyes. "Cutter's not just after you. He's after anyone who stands in his way. Carl's right. If we don't stop him here, he'll keep going. And I'm not letting that happen." Sealers' voice was rough. "You could still die." "Maybe, but I'd rather die standing up than live on my knees." Sealers looked away. "I don't deserve this." "No," Caleb agreed, "you don't. But Jonah would have done it anyway, so I am too." The next morning, Carl and 6 other ranchers arrived. They positioned themselves around the property, some in the barn, some behind the house, others in the tree line. Caleb sent Mary and Sarah to stay with a neighbor 10 miles away. She didn't want to go, but she trusted him. By noon, the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Cutter and his men rode in slow, 8 strong. They spread out across the yard, their rifles ready. Cutter sat tall in his saddle, his scarred face calm. "Last chance," he called out. "Hand over Sealers and we ride away." Caleb stepped out from the barn, rifle in hand. Behind him, Carl and the others emerged from their positions. Cutter's smile faded when he saw them. "You brought friends," Cutter said. "We take care of our own," Carl replied. Cutter's jaw tightened. He looked at his men, then back at Caleb. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but it's ours to make." For a long moment, no one moved. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the soft whicker of horses and the creak of leather. Then one of Cutter's men, the younger one with the patchy beard, lowered his rifle. "I ain't dying for this, Cutter." Cutter's head snapped toward him. "You walk, and you're done." The young man dismounted and walked away. Another followed, then another. Cutter's face darkened. He looked at Boone, the big man with the scarred face. Boone hesitated, then shook his head. "Sorry, boss, odds ain't good." Boone rode off. The others followed, leaving Cutter alone. Cutter sat in his saddle, his hand resting on his pistol. For a moment, Caleb thought he might draw, but then Cutter's shoulders sagged. He turned his horse and rode away without a word. The ranchers lowered their rifles. Tom let out a long breath. That was close. Carl clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "You did good." The ranchers stayed for a while, helping to reinforce the fences and keep watch. By evening, they rode off one by one, leaving Caleb and Sealers alone. Sealers stood in the barn doorway, leaning on a cane Caleb had carved for him. "I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," Caleb said. "Yes, I do," Sealers' voice was firm, "and I'll spend what's left of mine paying it back. Ho. Whether I can." Caleb looked at him for a long moment, then he nodded. "All right, stay until you're healed, then we'll figure out the rest." Sealers stayed through the winter. He mended fences, repaired the barn, helped with the cattle. He didn't talk much, but he worked hard, and slowly, over weeks and months, the weight in his eyes began to lift. One spring morning, Caleb found him standing by the fence line, staring at the horizon. "You thinking about leaving?" Caleb asked. Silas shook his head, "Thinking about staying, if you'll have me." Caleb considered, then he said, "We could use the help." Silas smiled just a little, "All right." Years later, when people asked Caleb why he'd taken in a man who'd wronged him so deeply, he never had a good answer. Sometimes he'd say it was for Jonah. Sometimes he'd say it was because everyone deserves a second chance. But the truth was simpler. He'd done it because, in the end, forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing not to let the past decide the future. And that, he'd learned, was the only way to be free. The sun dipped lower over the Montana hills. Dust rose around the barn. And in the quiet, two men who'd once been enemies worked side by side, building something new from the ashes of the old.